but do you put the hashtags in the comments or do you put it as part of the body of your text? There's this entire science around hashtags. But when you go to South Africa and you have a conversation, it turns out that the use of hashtags is an indicator to socially, in certain social circles, that you are desperate to get followers. No matter whether you're in for-profit or non-profit, whether you're selling something or an idea online or in person, the story is all. Because storytelling is all about creating a narrative about something that can connect with a person in the context of their own life. You know, multiculturalism and seeing different cultures is relative, right? Because for us here, and I'll say that I have the benefit in Toronto of being in one of the more, if not the most multicultural places in Canada.
And that's next on Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. So, the big question is this. How are ambitious people like us, who don't have a lot of resources, did not go to Ivy League colleges, were not born into wealth, how do we become resourceful enough? Use our creativity, our dedication, and a little bit of crazy to bootstrap our way to realizing our dreams. Whether it is launching a new company, launching a new app, or making it to the top of the corporate ladder. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. Hi listeners and viewers. We want to apologize in advance for the audio quality in this episode. We had some technical or environmental issues due to which the audio quality was not optimal. We tried to clean it as much as possible. We feel that the thoughts and ideas exchanged in this episode are of great importance and have deep meaning. So please judge it based on the content quality rather than the audio quality. If you like this video, do not forget to hit that like button now. Or if you want us to improve our content, go ahead and hit the thumbs down button and give us your feedback in the comment section below. Here at Tetranoodle, we are passionate about entrepreneurship, technology, and innovation. Every week, we bring you insightful and engaging interviews, tips, tricks, and strategies to help you grow your business or rise in your corporate profession. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing. And do not forget to hit that bell icon so that you are notified when we publish new content. Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manuj Aggarwal, and today we'll be talking with Mo Waja. So Mo is a professional speaker, marketer, entrepreneur, and the author of Present Impact, the Speaker's Guide. He's also the former host of Toronto Story Archive podcast and the current host and producer of Let's Talk Show podcast. He's an account manager at Blakely. Mo has worked with personal, non-profit, and for-profit brands in charitable software, finance, among other sectors. And to date, Mo has spent tens of thousands of hours coaching business professionals, entrepreneurs, non-profits, campaign advocates, post-secondary students, politicians, motivational speakers, and medical practitioners in the art of professional speaking and communication. Wow, that's an impressive resume. Welcome, Mo.
Thanks for having me, Manuj. I'm looking forward to, I'm excited to be here now.
Awesome, that's great. So just so that we can get to know you better, can you tell us a little bit more about your background, about your upbringing? You know, you have accomplished so much. So let's see who's the person behind the name.
Sure. I mean, so I'm in Toronto right now. I grew up in North Bay, Ontario. I mean, I moved here to Toronto where my career really began, I think about 10 years ago now. Started my first semester in chemical engineering at U of T before failing out spectacularly. Definitely was not the right place for me. And then eventually moving on to join Nipissing University in the business administration program before shifting gears to the Ted Rogers School of Management and completing my degree with a Bachelor of Commerce majoring in law. Now, I mean, I know it's not all about education, but the reason I like to start there is because, you know, even though entrepreneurship has this wicked bug that's going around right now where everyone's an entrepreneur, a lot of it is still couched in your education. I studied to be this, now I became this. Because of my schooling, I became this. And while school and education played a huge role in how I got to be who I am today. It was more the extracurricular components, the people I met along the way, the experiences I had that drove me to where I am right now. I'm a person who started out as an engineer, got a Bachelor of Commerce majoring in law, and now I moved from marketing to fundraising for not-for-profit organizations. So it's one of those things where it's been a circuitous route, to be sure, but super excited to be here and to be talking with you on the show.
Awesome. So after having that kind of diverse experience with the educational system, there's a lot of talk about, how our educational system is sort of behind the times or failing students. There's huge amount of student-led debt and all that stuff. So what do you think education system is valuable? People should go to college and get their degrees, or should they just, take the leap of faith and go out in the world and see what they're made of?
Well, it's twofold, right? I saw, I hate to cite memes, but I saw a meme type thing the other day where it had an image of a phone, like 50 years ago or however many years ago, and then the iPhone right now. And then it showed a classroom the same number of years ago and a classroom right now. And it looks virtually the same. I had a similar conversation with the current dean of the Ted Rogers School of Management, Daphne Terrace, on the podcast. That episode's still going to come out, but we had a good chat about it, about where education is on a post-secondary level, where it was before versus where it is now. And I think we can all agree, or most of us can agree, that education is kind of a mass market product. It's mass produced in the method by which we bring people into a classroom and teach them how to do a thing. And now that lecture style certainly has a role, but at least for myself, I found that being in case competition, doing competition, being in speaking competitions and debate connected me with the right people and gave me those soft skill components that are not typically taught in the more formalized setting of a classroom. Now, I mean, all of that said, you can't really just go off on your own, do your own thing and hope for the best, because there is still a lot of clout based upon your degree, even an MBA, a post-secondary education in general. There's a lot of clout based upon that, and there's still a social and a functional reality when a person doesn't have those things. For myself, I'm comfortable with having a bachelor's degree and now entering the world and seeing what's out there on a different educational level. But I think it also really depends on what you're going to do. Like, you can't get a bachelor's degree and say, I'm going to become a doctor now. You know what I mean? There's still education that needs to happen. So it's contextual.
Yeah, no, that's true. The experiences that you described, which are over and above the academics, I think those are the important things. And yeah, I mean, if you can get it out of an educational institution, I think that's a very good thing. But a lot of people either do not get it, or they end up, acquiring a lot of debt to get this degree, and then they get into the grinder right away as soon as they get the degree, right? So, but anyway, let's talk about your various experiences. So, one of the things that I want to talk about is your connection with South Africa as well. So, can you tell us a little bit about that? How it's all connected?
Absolutely. Now, I mean, my family is all South African. I wasn't born in South Africa. I didn't grow up in South Africa, but I had the benefit of parents who were very connected to their home country and to the vast number of family members that I still have there back in South Africa. I actually traveled there, not last year, but the year before we traveled to South Africa. So, I mean, it's one of those things where you're very connected to your family and connected to where you came from, or at least I am. So being South African and being connected to South Africa is very much a part of my personality, quite deeply, because we had the benefit of going frequently when we were younger, all throughout our childhood, and having these really deep emotional bonds and connection with family in the home country, which is something that, I mean, unfortunately, not everybody has the opportunity to have, even when they have family back wherever their family came from decades ago, years ago, however long ago it was. My parents moved here just before I was born. So I was born in Canada and I am Canadian, but socially and through my heritage, I definitely consider myself, at least in part, South African, and South Africa being a deep part of who I am as an individual. Now, recently, that became quite interesting because when I started the Let's Talk Show podcast, I had the opportunity to go back to South Africa and, amongst generally visiting, interviewing a number of not-for-profit professionals, talking about the conversations that they have in and around South Africa, how they tell their stories and how they essentially solicit donations. And all of this came from a talk that I delivered back in, I believe, it was last year at AFP Congress, which is the third largest fundraising conference in the world, talking about marketing versus mission, how to sell the story of a nonprofit without creating exploitative content, especially when you're working with a vulnerable population or a population that is coming from somewhere else, something that has been long overlooked in the not-for-profit sector, and while certainly getting better, isn't something that has been really effectively solved, if solved is the right word to go with when describing a kind of social contextual situation like this.
Sure. So that must have been a very different experience, very exotic experience. Not just from visiting family, of course. You have deep roots there, but also looking at a different culture altogether. How people live, what kind of weather they have, what kind of food they eat. So did you have any kind of a culture shock when you visited another country like South Africa?
Well, I mean, South Africa, not really, right? Because I've been to South Africa so many times that in a very real way, when we pull into one of my aunt's houses or something like that, or even when we land and we're getting out into the car with my family, it feels like home, right? Like it's South Africa, not really, because there's so much of my experiences in my life that have been in and around South Africa. But I mean, you go to other places around the world and you definitely do get that. I mean, Morocco is an easy example for me. I mean, really enjoyed my trip to Morocco, but I'd be lying if I said that it was an immediately comfortable environment, just because it's a place that I'd never been before, a culture I'd never experienced, a language barrier to a degree, of course, and just an entirely different environment. But I mean, I'm a person who loves that. Like that aspect is really attractive to me. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was pointing at. Like, what I mean is, having these foreign experiences, how does that, can you contrast that with the homogeneous experience of North American countries like Canada and US? In my opinion, there's not a huge amount of diversity that we experience if we just, are confined in this part of the world. But if we go across to other continents, you see such diversity. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Like, how can you contrast that, and how has that shaped your character over the years?
So I mean, multiculturalism and seeing different cultures is relative, right? Because for us here, and I'll say that I have the benefit in Toronto of being in one of the more, if not the most, multicultural places in Canada. So I do see a little bit of it here and there, depending on where you are and the location you're in. But where I think it's really interesting is our perception of business and how business, or in my case, nonprofit work, is done here versus in another country. So I'm going to actually take a little bit of a left and move away from, what does it mean to see another culture? Because I think that depends on the person and their subjective experience. I've had the benefit of having a family that likes to travel. So moving from one place to another culturally doesn't hit me quite as hard. But in the context of this conversation around South African nonprofit experiences, that was very interesting, because now you're looking at a world where we in North America see ourselves and this country as the central hub of all things business and all things corporate and all things marketing. And part of the reason for that, of course, is because, Facebook, Twitter, etc., they put you in mind, no matter where they all put you immediately in mind of America, Silicon Valley, technology. This is what it is. And so we see North America, and really the US specifically, as the hub, the thought leader, and the direction that we're taking everything in terms of how we go about developing business and industry. But a different country like South Africa, you see that isn't really seen as reality. You go to South Africa and you talk to people within South Africa or business professionals there, and they're not sitting there saying, wow, we really need to do things more like the United States, or, Canada's really got it down there on the marketing level. If we did things more like Canada, that's the way it would be. No, I mean, there's a lot of pride in South Africa in being South African. One of the most interesting concepts that I noticed there wasn't even in the course of how I looked at nonprofit organizations. It was when I was having a conversation with my cousin about Instagram. right? So we're here in North America and we're all over Instagram, right? Instagram is a big marketing hub. It's a place where anyone and everyone can promote themselves. And part of the way we do that is through the use of hashtags. And there's this whole kind of internal industry about finding the right hashtags, developing the right hashtags. Instagram has a 30 hashtag limit. Do you go up to 30 hashtags, or do you use approximately 30 hashtags? How far afield do you go from your core set of hashtags? I have a document on my phone with hashtag blocks for different things that I could copy into Instagram depending on what I'm talking about. But do you put the hashtags in the comments, or do you put it as part of the body of your text? There's this entire science around hashtags. But when you go to South Africa and you have a conversation, it turns out that the use of hashtags is an indicator to socially, in certain social circles, that you are desperate to get followers. And so it's actually looked down upon to use hashtags at all, or even use excessive hashtags, or use hashtags unironically. Because if you are really popular and you're a real influencer, then you don't need hashtags to get likes, views, and have people follow along. And I think that just this minor conversation about where do hashtags fit in, because they are such a part of our social and marketing culture now, is so critical, because we look at it here as the science around how to use a hashtag, whereas over there on the other side, where Instagram is used differently, it's seen as an entirely different situation where hashtags themselves, the lack of use of them, is actually the positive. You know what I mean? So I don't know that it's about your social culture, because that's a huge conversation. But for me, what's fascinating is that on a business level, we have this general perception, at least me, I've had this general perception that we are kind of leading the pack in terms of this is how you do marketing. And so when you go somewhere else, you bring all of that knowledge and to a degree that ego with you. But the social context and a cultural context around the very nature of business itself, business that we nowadays consider globalized. And that's what I considered super fascinating and found really fascinating about going to South Africa.
For sure. It is a fascinating thing. And thanks a lot for sharing that. Now, as you experienced all these different things, are you bringing in some ideas from there and vice versa? Are you taking some ideas from North America to implement there or make it more popular there?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that I've definitely brought back, and that's specifically with regards to not-for-profit organizations, right, is that one of the interesting things that I discovered in a conversation with Michael McTernan of Save the Children was that I don't know that my thesis in my marketing versus mission talk was entirely correct. Because my thesis in that talk was that you have countries externally, any country. I'm just going to use country as a general blanket phrase, right? You have other places outside of North America. And we, within North America, tell a narrative about what life is like in that country. I mean, Africa is a great example because for years, North America has talked about the African continent as if it was a single country with a single people, all of whom behave exactly the same and have the exact same problems, right? So I think we've all at least begun to realize that that is wholly incorrect, right? There are many, many countries within the continent of South Africa, on the continent of Africa, South Africa being one of them. And all of these different places have different contextual elements that come into play. But the interesting part is that after we do this, we feel a great deal of guilt about pointing out the problems that might or might not exist and using them as an opportunity to solicit donations or funding. Now, what's interesting in my conversation with Michael McTernan was that he talked about the fact that South Africa, at least from their perspective at Save the Children, is very much couched in reality. So there is no great fear of pointing out these social, cultural divides or challenges that exist within the country for the purpose of getting donations. And what that's led to is this interesting world of nonprofit entrepreneurship. And this is a conversation that extended with Colin Haberton of the Relative Group. Because now, because of the social, cultural, and business context of South Africa, you have not-for-profit organizations that instead of focusing 100% on soliciting new donations from a pool of monthly donors, regular donors, annual donors. And in a world where now that South Africa has grown and is a strongly middle income country, and now that many of the international grants aren't as focused on South Africa specifically versus any of the other places around the world that need help, these nonprofits to function have begun focusing on the idea of internal not-for-profit entrepreneurship. So how can we generate an income for ourselves and then put that income towards social good, as opposed to the focus of how do we get so-and-so at this address in this place to make a donation with the latest email, direct mail piece, premium, etc., that we're sending across to them. So I don't know that I've implemented it specifically yet. I mean, I definitely have. But it's something that's always top of mind for me when I'm looking at the world of not-for-profit, because you have a country that is middle income that relied almost exclusively on grants, right? Both internally, corporate grants and international grants. But now, because it's middle income, because it's less, facing fewer challenges, now they need to generate revenue for themselves. So it's created this interesting blend of for and nonprofit perspective, where entrepreneurship and the concept of entrepreneurship at a not-for-profit or charitable level is once again about generating income. Then it's about attribution of income. So that I found personally super fascinating.
Awesome. And so, we've been talking about nonprofit. It struck me, a lot of people do not, including myself, I don't have a lot of clarity on what nonprofit actually means. Like if you don't make a profit, how do you survive? How do you pay the employees? How do you carry out the activities that you do? And secondly, like what is your personal satisfaction if you're working for a nonprofit? Like how does that all fit in?
So, I mean, and I'm going to preface this by saying I'm by no means an expert on, the corporate structure and fiscal attribution of not-for-profit organizations.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you make a good point. This belief that to be a non-profit means not have money. And that's not actually true, right? Many nonprofits, because of their donors, their relationship, grants, etc., have significant amounts of money, right? But it's all about where that money is attributed. One thing that is a standout value for nonprofit organizations is the amount of actual donations that go towards the end cause or the end beneficiary, right? Because nonprofits, like any other organization, has overhead, right? They have that employees pay, they have rent, depending on where they are. They might have a mortgage, right? They have materials that they need to purchase, and some of them aren't interesting materials. Like, we're not talking water trucks and charity water. We're talking office supplies, right? Things that are needed for the business to function. So it's about the ratio of the amount of dollars that go towards functional elements within the organization and the number of dollars that go towards the end beneficiary. Now, I'll preface this by saying I might be wrong on this definition, but as a general rule, I think what it comes down to is that nonprofits don't hold profit in and then pay out shareholders in dividends or carry profit over into the next year. What they do is they work with the money that they have, and as much of that money as possible needs to be spent. Well, all of that money needs to be spent. As much of that money as possible needs to be spent towards the end beneficiary, whether that's people affected by cancer, whether that's children, whether that's refugees. It's about attribution of funds. So it doesn't mean you can't pay people. You have to pay people. You have to pay people functionally so they can do the work. It's about attributing the funds in the best way possible for your end beneficiary.
Awesome. That's great. And second part of the question was, I don't know whether you answered it or you may want to touch upon, like, what is your personal satisfaction by being involved in nonprofits?
So, point of clarity, right now, I don't work for a nonprofit. Blakely is not a not-for-profit organization. Blakely is a fundraising agency that works exclusively with not-for-profit organizations to help them reach their fundraising goals. I have worked previously within nonprofit organizations, and I've worked with, as a consultant, nonprofit organizations, and I've had the benefit of interviewing a number of nonprofit organizations. Currently, as a fundraiser at Blakely, I have the opportunity to work with and alongside numerous not-for-profit organizations in order to help them reach their fundraising goals. But I don't think that takes away from the question of satisfaction, because at the end of the day, for me, one of the things that I find most interesting is that, I'm a marketer. I'm a story person. I'm all about the good story that does social good. And nonprofit is fascinating because nonprofit is nonfiction. In traditional marketing, and I'm making it a bit anemic here, like it's a bit two-dimensional to say it like this, but what you're doing is you're creating this narrative around a product that exists in the world that other people buy into so that they will be better at something, right? So like, buy this shoe and you will suddenly be the best runner ever. Like, you'll be Usain Bolt, right? If you buy this shirt, then you're going to be the best MMA fighter in the world. If you buy these gloves, you're going to box like Muhammad Ali, right? You buy this racket, you're going to hit like Nadal. I mean, these are all sports references, but get this haircut and you'll be even more beautiful than you were previously. Get this cream and you'll no longer have acne, right? But it's all about creating this narrative around a product. And that narrative often just isn't real, right? Like it's real-ish. It's real enough, right? Like it's not an outright lie, but it's real-ish. It's a fictional narrative that you create around a product to make things better. Even Nike's recent campaign, you know, the Kaepernick campaign, which was wicked. I love it, right? Like I love that ad, you know, but the implication of that ad, right, is that if you buy into Nike or the Nike philosophy, you'll stand for something. You'll be better. You'll be your own person. That's the implication behind that campaign, even though that campaign had a very non-for-profit spin, right? Now, nonprofits, on the other hand, are telling nonfiction stories. And that's truly fascinating. Because these stories do solicit donations, but it's about taking a real situation that is often unbelievably challenging, and telling it in a way that is tasteful, connects with people no matter what context they are in their life, and makes them want to contribute to a cause and are doing good in the process. So that's really interesting, because now it's not just about what narrative can I make so that this person and their kids or whatever want to buy my toy. You know, now it's about getting people to really and deliberately and almost altruistically apportion some of their income in a materialistic world to something that does not give them a materialistic outcome. It's an emotional outcome, it's a social outcome, and it connects inherently to a level of humanity that I find, again, very, very interesting.
That's great. Well said. All right, so let's talk about your marketing skills. And you said that you are an amazing storyteller, which is obviously apparent from this interview so far. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, how important is storytelling? What kind of techniques or what kind of things that you add to your storytelling to make it compelling, make it interesting?
Absolutely. Now, I mean, again, I keep using the word context, because context is everything when it comes to storytelling, right? There's a different style and context of telling stories online. There's a different method of telling stories when you're on a stage in person presenting something. But no matter whether you're in for-profit or non-profit, whether you're selling something or an idea online or in person, the story is all. Because storytelling all about creating a narrative about something that can connect with a person in the context of their own life. Stories, and what that means is that stories are one of the oldest ways in which we communicate. Whether it's directions, recipes, like cultural history, it was told in the past via stories, usually verbally via stories, but also in written stories. There's a reason that books are such a hallowed thing in the world, because they contain stories and narratives around how people live their life. Now, there's a basic formula to telling a good story and how good stories are told, right? I mean, in general, and to go over it in brief, what you generally want to do is, especially if you're in person and telling a story to get people to buy into an idea, is you want to deliver context right off the bat, tell a person why something is important to them and they're connected to it. You want to lead them along the line that I tend to call the rising action, which is introduce ideas that are connected to that context, that reinforce why this idea, this thing, this object, this concept, this perspective that you're selling is something that they should buy into, should be connected to them. You have information that you give them to reinforce that idea, all of which comes down to a call to action of some kind that makes them want to take action based upon the narrative you've told them. And then you bring it back into the context of their life. But storytelling at its core is just about recognizing that the lecture way of doing things, simply telling somebody, this is what's right or this is what you should do because I said so is a non-functional approach to communicating things with people. Because everybody has a narrative within their own life. You've heard the phrase, we're all the hero of our own story. And that's very true. We all have a narrative that we tell ourselves about who we are, what we've done, the kind of person that we are, and why the opinions that we hold about ourselves, about the world around us are inherently true. And so in order to get people to change those ideas or to shift or to connect with you in some way, you need to change that narrative. And the way you do that is by telling a more compelling story. So when you look at advertisements, or at least good advertisements, right? You're telling, most of them would tell a narrative, taking a person from where they are right now in the status quo to where they could be if they take a certain kind of action in some way. So in my background, I did competitive debate for about 5 years. And competitive debate is all about telling a better story than the other team. And it's the most fascinating kind of public speaking, in my opinion, because it's the only kind of public speaking where you're getting up there and you have other people who are actively trying to tell you and an audience that they are smarter than you are and they know more than you do, right? So it's truly competitive storytelling. And what you're doing when you get up there is you have a panel of judges and you have an audience, and they all have preconceptions about the world around them based upon the narrative that they tell themselves about their lives, based upon the narrative that news media has told them, based upon what their parents have told them, based upon what their buddies have told them. And now you're getting up there, and what you're really saying is, listen, what you know is probably wrong. I have a better story to tell you about the way the world is right now.
Yeah.
And if you listen and you take action, your life will be better in some way. That's where the key to good storytelling starts, with context, because you lay out context for the world as it exists in this moment right now. Something that everybody can agree is the way of the world. Yeah. Once everybody's bought into that, then what you want to do is start introducing why that's a problem, why whatever's happening right now is problematic in some way that's related to whatever you're selling, right? So whether that's saying that, we have a refugee crisis, or whether that's saying that, those shoes aren't letting you run fast enough, right? No matter what it is, you're telling people that the status quo that you've laid out for them is not ideal.
Yeah.
And then you're giving them a whole bunch of information to bring them to the point where they're saying, you know what, maybe it's not ideal. Like maybe this isn't the best way for the world to be. And then that is when you deliver a call to action of some kind. Where you're saying, but hold on, it doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah.
If you donate today, if you buy this shoe, if you eat this magical ice cream, somehow the problem that we introduced in the status quo in context will be better.
Awesome.
And once you've given them that call to action, now what you want to do is you give them new context. You say, if you eat this magical ice cream, then you will be more beautiful, you'll be smarter, you'll be better at your job, you'll get that promotion, you'll have like, your kids will be better. You know what I mean? Right? If you buy this shoe, then suddenly you'll run so much faster, you'll jump so much higher. If you donate today, you could be part of the solution that changes the very fabric of the world and how we treat multicultural nations and people who are coming to our country, right? If you donate today, you could cure cancer. That could be you. That dollar that you spent, that could be the dollar. Right? So that's storytelling in a nutshell. It's creating context for where we are right now, explaining or planting the seed of doubt for why that's a problem, and telling a narrative of how it could be better if that person takes a certain action. And then you remind them, this is what life could be like, whether it's for you, whether it's for your children, whether it's for the rest of the world, whether it's for the universe itself. This is what life could be like on an aspirational level if they do this thing. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Yeah, no, that was beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing that. Made total sense. And as you were explaining it, I was actually getting emotionally attached to that narrative right away. You have a gift for sure. So congratulations on all the success that you've had and all the good that you're spreading around the world. Now, before I let you go, can you tell us a little bit about your company or your organization and how people can reach out to you?
Sure. I mean, the best way to reach out to me is via email, mo@mowaja.com, or over social media on everything. It's at IAM Mo Waja, MOWAJA.
Awesome.
I mean, what I'm into right now, I mean, I do public speaking. I speak at events. I teach public speaking on an organizational level, and I present at conferences and deliver presentations on everything ranging from branding and personal branding to public speaking and professional communication, and how to speak more effectively on an interpersonal level to a small group or in front of a large audience.
Awesome.
The organization I'm with right now, Blakely, works with not-for-profit organizations to help them reach and exceed their fundraising goals, not just through direct mail, but also over social media, over digital media, and an omni-channel, multi-channel fashion. So, I mean, anything in that line, whether it's public speaking, branding and personal branding, or not-for-profit, I mean, feel free to hit me up. Appreciate the plug, Manuj. Appreciate the plug.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Hey, listeners and viewers. We have created a tremendous community of bootstrappers, entrepreneurs, and professionals who are ambitious, resourceful, and want to get things done. We brainstorm, support, and help each other out. Come join us. Navigate to bootstrapping.group. That is bootstrapping.group. And that's all for now. Until next time. And if you're an existing or an aspiring tech entrepreneur, then I invite you to check out my new online workshop, Bootstrapping Your Tech Startup Dreams. Go to bootstraptechstartup.com and sign up for free. I want to make sure that more successful and sound decisions are made every day in your tech projects. Let's start finding solutions to your problems. So go to bootstraptechstartup.com, and I look forward to helping you with your tech projects. If you want more engaging videos and insightful interviews with industry's thought leaders, then check out other videos we have picked for you. The link is right there. And if you want to be notified about our new content, please do consider subscribing to our channel.